Hello, Doctor Who fans, and welcome to this week's review for season one of Doctor Who. We are basically going to start our review looking at obviously this week is the episode known as 73 Yards. Russell's in charge again, the writing of the story, and well, I think the majority of you and the majority of Whovians are probably looking at this, probably a bit confused, or they think, I think most of us are quite confused coming out of this story. And I'm kind of on the same boat because there are some things that I feel like might need explaining more, or I think it's almost like I think I sort of get the gist of where Russell's going, but then I feel like there's some stuff in the storyline that doesn't seem to make sense, but it fits the story, but then there's some elements that haven't really been explained properly. That's how I'm coming across this story because it's a very, very bizarre story. Because the story, some of the elements of the story is good, but there are some confusing elements to it that I feel like need to be explained more to sort of get a gist of what is actually going on here. But anyway, we might as well discuss the story. And by the way, for those for those of you who haven't seen the story yet, then this is definitely a good time to maybe turn away if you haven't seen the story and come back to this once you have, because I'll be interested to hear from all of you how you feel about the story, whether you feel it was confusing or whether you feel that you sort of got a gist of what this story really is. I mean, yeah, it's one of those stories that even though it's Doctor Light in some regard, there are some, I still feel like we came across, like we sort of think we know, but then we don't know at the same time. So best time to move to turn away now if you don't want the gist of the story. So I'm going to give you a few seconds to do that. All right, so let's discuss about 73 yards and try to get some sort of gist of this story because I will admit it is a good story. It's just a lot of confusing elements. So essentially, what the interesting part about all of this is that there is no opening theme this week. Let's keep this in mind. We go straight into the episode. They say obviously 73 yards written by Russell, no opening theme whatsoever, which is obviously obviously they haven't done that in a little while, so it's good to see that they brought that back. And they go straight to the scene of the TARDIS landing on the Welsh coast, right? Yeah, obviously, and interestingly, funny enough, the Doctor actually says the name of the upcoming spin-off that is supposed to be coming, called the War Between the Land and the Sea, which is what the name of the Sea Devils spin-off is essentially going to be. And even though it hasn't been properly officially confirmed by the BBC, but there has been a lot of insider knowledge that knows that this thing is actually real and the spin-off is essentially coming, but we don't know when exactly it's coming. So it's interesting that Ncuti was 15th Doctor says this because it begs the question, are we going to be getting an announcement regarding the spin-off anytime soon? Probably, considering he mentioned the name, and people are going to be a bit confused by that. So and I would imagine a lot of people are going to be confused that, oh, why did he say this? But some of us know that is actually the name of a spin-off that's actually coming. So they're going to obviously have to confirm this now that the 15th Doctor said those words. So obviously I could definitely imagine there's going to be some sort of a announcement regarding that spin-off soon, considering we know it's coming and they've been working on it behind the scenes, but they haven't said anything about it officially to the press. So hopefully that will come out soon. Then of course, obviously the Doctor talks about like, oh, G. William saying, oh yeah, he's like evil, like a really really scary person, and obviously we do meet him eventually in the story. He's that politician, that Welsh politician who's trying to become part of the British government, and yeah, that didn't go well for him. Even though, well, he kind of was considered as Mad Jack in the Welsh coast, as we found out in the story that, yeah, he's essentially Mad Jack, but under that politician name. Obviously, Ruby was investigating, and we'll get back to that very shortly. Anyway, so of course, we see the Doctor and Ruby coming into the Welsh coast. He steps onto the summoning circle, as I like to call that circle that they stepped on, because obviously, if you see a circle that the Doctor Ruby saw, you would basically it's essentially referred to as a summoning circle. When you have all these different shapes around the circle, it's kind of sort of like sort of like a devil possessed sort of thing. That it's an ancient thing essentially. But obviously the Doctor steps on it and then he disappears, and we don't really know what happened there because he disappears. I mean, obviously, the initial reason for why Shooting Up wasn't in most of the story was because he was filming Sex Education at the time they were filming the story. But in terms of the storyline sense, we don't know what happened. We don't know why the Doctor disappeared. We don't know what happened to how he came back, and he never really came back until they restarted that beginning scene. And yeah, yeah, we never really knew what happened to the Doctor. Did he ever come back after stepping into the circle? We didn't see anything. We didn't see him come back or anything. It almost felt like he was pretty much gone forever. That's not obviously the case because it turns out that we'll get to the ending point soon, obviously. So yeah, so he's disappeared, and then Ruby gets a little nervous and worried, like, where is the Doctor? Where's the Doctor gone? And then she realizes there's a woman, staring at her and sort of following her, and we weren't so sure who she was at first, but what we've noticed is that if any person goes up and speaks to her, they look at Ruby, but then they run away, or they look at Ruby and they are very angry at Ruby. That is something that you'll notice is they're very angry at Ruby, especially Ruby's mother, who at one point, obviously Ruby returns home to her mother, and her mother, obviously is on the phone looking at the woman, and then the woman does something, makes them turn to Ruby, and then Ruby's mother, Ruby's sort of foster mother, looks at her. She's angry. She walks out on her, and then she changes the locks of the house to make sure that Ruby can't get in. And then she basically goes on this rant saying, "Oh, I can understand now why your mother never wanted you." And it was really, really really harsh stuff coming out of her foster mother. Like her foster mother just hated her because of this woman who's possessed her mind into thinking that she's the devil all of a sudden, which is really very bizarre. Why it do that to someone, and then it even did it to Kate Stewart because obviously at one point she made contact with Unit and Kate Stewart because she was saying to Kate Stewart like something's not right, like the Doctor disappears, and she came into contact with her, but then all of a sudden the Unit soldiers get engaged, and then it affects Kate Stewart, and then Kate Stewart looks at Ruby, and then she says disengage, and basically they just walk off, and it really just shows that this woman seems to have made everyone hate Ruby, whoever comes in contact with it, which is very interesting. So very, very bizarre situation there. The fact that Ruby gets followed by this woman, but yet any person who interacts with her, they're either afraid of Ruby, or if they're somebody who knows Ruby, they get very angry at her, which is very, very telling, the way that this is setting up. But of course, obviously when she was being followed by the woman, also another thing to note, we did see that Susan Twist character playing the hiker, and then she interacts with this thing and she runs away. She thinks it was a game. It turns out she was very afraid after she talked to the woman about the so-called, obviously when she said to, and also it's interesting is that Ruby even said to her, "I swear I've met you somewhere before." So you can see that Ruby recognizes that face very easily. So now that Ruby's starting to notice that face is popping up a little bit more, I'm wondering if the Doctor and Ruby are going to keep catching on to the fact that this Susan Twist actress keeps popping up in their adventures. I wonder, yeah, I feel like they're going to keep calling this out every time they see her now, because funny enough, she's actually going to be in the next episode once again. So of course they're going to have to call this out, that like something doesn't seem right here. So it's going to be interesting. But either way, we obviously get to a pub in the Welsh coast. Because obviously there's a nearby town. She goes into this pub, and yeah, some of those people were a bit unusual with her, and she brings up this woman, like, why is this woman like following her, and then she brings up the whole circle, and then they try to scare her by like, oh, about the whole Mad Jack stuff, but then obviously it was just basic, and obviously someone was knocking the door. It was basically just someone bringing fresh food to the pub, basically. But yeah, they tried to make fun out of her, and obviously you kind of would feel sorry for Ruby that someone was making fun out of these terrifying things that are happening to her. And then obviously she buys a bed and breakfast in the pub, but because of one of their pub friends got really scared when speaking to the woman, they kicked her out because they thought that she was the troublemaker when Ruby wasn't the troublemaker because she didn't do anything. She just wanted to know what happened to the doctor. She wanted the doctor back, and she wanted to get this mess off her head, basically. And you can't really blame her for especially because she's very bizarre, very curious about what's actually going on. So yeah, so obviously at that point she decides to, obviously, as I mentioned, she goes home, she meets her mom and I guess her grand, and obviously that's when she gets locked out of the house. And it was from that point, obviously she can't make contact with her mother because her mother thinks that she's, Ruby's the devil. When Ruby's trying to explain to her, look, I'm not the devil. I'm just, let's go and have some food and talk this out. This foster mother was like, no, get out, pretty much. So yeah, things were pretty harsh for Ruby throughout this story, and it was very clear that things weren't particularly going well for her. And then eventually she comes across obviously a video of Roger D. William, trying to become the prime minister. And obviously she came across as the Albion store where she would volunteer herself to his campaign. And obviously, she actually chats to the person following his interview for the election 46. Now, notice it is election 46. So this is obviously set in the future because it's also kind of interesting, obviously, as well. They're bringing up the government considering we're meant to be getting a general election in just a few weeks, in about 2 or so months' time. So it's kind of interesting time for this story to come out, especially now that we're hearing about the general election that's happening. Very interesting time in there by Russell. But anyway, so obviously we see that whole election campaign going on, and then of course Ruby, chats with G. Williams, and then obviously they end up going to a football pitch where he was obviously following his pretty much to prime ministership, and he was about to do a massive interview in one of the football pitches. I'm not sure what football pitch it was. I would imagine it's the one nearest to London or probably Wales that they were filming in. But yeah, they filmed in one of the popular football stadium, and they were going to do like this broadcast of him being the prime minister and his first like address since the victory. And obviously, Ruby obviously confronts this girl who mentions about G. William being a monster. So she was also sort of on the same side as Ruby, bringing up the fact that Roger G. William is a monster and he needs to be gone out of office. And you can definitely tell that she was very afraid about him being the prime minister, which is very interesting. Of course, by that point, Ruby decides, I'm going to go on the pitch, even though one of the managers has said, they specifically said that no one would go on the bridge. She decides to walk 73 yards, bring that woman to the stage. G.R. William ends up confronting it, and he ends up running away and resigning the second she encounters this woman. So yeah, so basically Ruby uses this stalking woman as a weapon against him that forces him out of the politics, which is great move by Ruby, and it kind of just terrifies him to the point that he just doesn't want anything to do with that prime ministership anymore. From that point on, it gets even more bizarre, obviously, because also in between all of this, we do see Ruby living in a flat, and she's kind of, well, we assume she's trying to go on dates with guys and stuff. Obviously, none of them really work out, really, because I think the reason why she was doing it is because she had no idea what her purpose was. But then when she realizes her purpose was to save the world, then she was like, yeah, I don't really need to date a guy, do I? So of course, when that all finished, obviously Ruby was in this flat, and then we jump to like 40 years later, where Ruby is very much an old woman. I would imagine she's in her 60s at this point. Yeah, but I think she's pretty much would be in her 60s at this point. And yeah, we basically see her as an old woman with a friend talking to the abandoned TARDIS because she she's talking to the TARDIS like the Doctor can hear her, but obviously she's reaching her old age. She's very close to death, obviously. But then while she was asleep, she encounters that same sort of figure who has got her back towards her, but then she turns her back, and I think we assume to believe she's meant to be the older Ruby is kind of what I'm taking this. Yeah, I think what it's meant to be is like, or at least this is how I believe it's meant to be, is that she's meant to be the older Ruby, but sort of like a scary, yeah, sort of try to like haunt her in a way, if that makes any sense. I wonder if that's how I'm seeing this. It's like she's meant to be this older Ruby who follows her when she's young. Essentially, this is some kind of like a spell of something that that has been following Ruby. But then all of a sudden, as soon as we see that, we see a little bit of flashbacks, and then it goes right back to that opening scene. The difference this time is that woman's disappeared. She recognizes that woman, and then all of a sudden, the Doctor is like, "Oh, which woman?" And then the woman's gone. So it's almost like we are led to believe that it's an older version of Ruby that follows the younger Ruby and was used as a weapon to save Ruby at the same time. Really bizarre. So if that is essentially meant to be Ruby doing sign language, then why would it force her own foster mother to like hate her and Kate Stewart to hate her, but then others to run away? What was the purpose of that? Because surely there's got to be an explanation as to why some would run away and then some went angry at her. Like there's that's the part that I find a bit confusing, is that how come some of them run away, but yet some are angry at her, especially Kate Stewart and the foster mother are just angry at her and they don't want nothing to do with her. Like that, that's the part that I'm finding a bit odd about all of this. But nevertheless, Ruby, and also you'll notice in the conversation between Ruby and the Doctor that she mentions she went to Wales 3 times, but obviously the third time was the adventure that we had for most of the story. But then that when we come to the end, it's almost like it's almost like they hit the reset button, and then all of a sudden, this third time, her going to Wales is essentially with the Doctor, but without that creepiness. Which, it's. I feel like it's what it almost feels like this story was essentially almost like it was taken from one of Stephen Moffat's errors, where he made these weird timey-wimey adventures were very confusing, but then it went straight into Russell T Davis's mind, or at least he tried to make sense of it, but then it almost like he kind of not really explained the whole what happened to the Doctor thing, which I feel like he left that out either by purpose or he forgot to write down what actually happened to him. At least that's how I'm reading this, because it's really bizarre, because usually Russell's really good at explaining what happens, but the fact that he didn't explain what happened to the Doctor when he disappeared in terms of like the story side of things, he would have put an explanation on the storyline. The fact that he didn't really, it's really bizarre, because usually we don't have episodes like this for Russell. Usually Russell's really good at explaining stuff to us through his scripts, but the fact that he didn't explain it this time is really bizarre, and I think that's the reason why people are confused, because usually Russell's really good at putting really good detail to what's actually happening, but because we didn't have that much detail, I'm wondering if the reason why we didn't get much detail is because he's saving some of the plot points for the finale, which would explain it, why we didn't get much explanation as to why everybody was hating Ruby, because essentially this is going to be used as a plot device for the finale. And essentially what we're seeing is like the first steps towards that finale, if that makes any sense. Because I mean, I kind of felt like this story was gonna essentially maybe be somewhat of a build up to the finale, but even though there wasn't really anything that screamed the finale, we did see Kate Stewart, but Kate Stewart was angry at Ruby. So I wonder if people being angry at Ruby is going to be a theme going into this finale. Like if anyone engages with Ruby, it's going to affect, they're going to be going insane or something. I don't know. It's just there's something about that makes me think there are some elements in there that are being kept for the finale on purpose, just so it throws us off of what's actually really going on. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like there was something missing in this story that hasn't been explained to us properly, or it's been saved for the finale. That's how I came across this story. I came across like there's something there that I'm missing, you know? But either way, I'll be curious to see what you think of the story in the comment section below. But of course, we might as well mention about the next time trailer, which obviously is Dot and Bubbles. And obviously the slug creature is definitely involved. And what's really interesting is that we have this sort of hologram messages from the Doctor and Ruby talking about all these slug creatures and trying to warn everyone, like, guys, try to avoid this slug creature and avoid this interaction. Otherwise, you're going to get caught. And I wonder if, I think the theme of this story is going to be centered around the slug capturing people, and it's going to be in its database, or at least that's how I'm seeing it based on what the trailer seems to show. But nevertheless, we'll get to see this story unfold next week because, of course, Dots and Bubble is going to be next week's story. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Dots and Bubble. And yes, but anyway, we got that's for next week. But for this week in general, 73 yards. Like I said, I enjoyed the story. Like I said, I feel like there's some things missing in terms of explanation in the story that didn't get explained when they should have done. But I think I wouldn't be surprised if it was by purpose. Stuff wasn't explained because they were saving it for the finale, or there's going to be something in the finale that would explain what happened during this trip by Ruby and why it got restarted. Perhaps somebody was fiddling with Ruby's timeline, maybe that would explain it. I don't know. Just leave me your thoughts and theories in the comment section, and we'll hopefully get some sort of a discussion going of really happened here. Like, was it a timeline mess up, or was it somebody fiddling with Ruby's timeline? And also, by the way, we did get to see Mrs. Flood. She didn't seem too bothered about what was going on, and also she also found it a bit bizarre that Ruby was chatting on the phone when her mother's in the distance. So might as well keep that in mind, knowing that she was a bit bothered by the idea of Ruby chatting to her mother on the phone while she was in person. Interesting, and then she just disappears after that. I feel like Mrs. Flood will appear more in the finale. I like to believe she will, considering she just appeared briefly in this story, but she didn't really have any huge importance except for the fact that she just didn't look bothered about what was going on, which is really bizarre. Let me know in the conversation your thoughts on the story, and I will catch you all in my upcoming Who Universe news, looking at obviously synopsises and obviously overnight figures for this story, as well as the synopsis for the Roger story that's going to finally have a synopsis out this week. And I'll catch you all during the week. See you then.